My name's Danny Webber, you're watching Stretty News TV.
Jonathan Schrager here for Stretty News TV. We're here today at Campo Retro in Bredbury, Manchester. Our partner here now, Campo Retro, and I'm joined by ex-Man United striker Danny Webber. First of all, Danny, how are we doing?
Yeah, ticking along nicely, thanks. Just keeping my fitness up during the summer, obviously, with next season in mind.
Yeah, fantastic. And you sort of mentioned there, obviously, well documented that Saltford City got the promotion this year. Are you enjoying your football there at the moment?
I am, to be honest. It was a bit of a minefield when I first went. I didn't know what to expect. Yeah. Sort of, dropping down so many leagues, but I've really enjoyed it. I think the camaraderie of the place, and I think obviously with the owners and what they set out to do, and where they want to take it, it's a fantastic place to be at the moment.
Yeah, and obviously you mentioned the owners there, well publicised at the class of '92, bought the club, and are obviously sort of trying to catapult it up through the divisions. Was that a big sort of incentive for yourself to join Salford City?
If I'm honest, it was the incentive. I think I wouldn't be playing for Salford City now had they not taken over. I don't think it was something that I'd ever looked at. But when you speak to the owners and they're so passionate about winning and achieving and sort of building something monumental for the community as well, I think it was something that I was happy to be on board with.
Yeah, and obviously the very notable characters, all of them, the several figures of the class of '92. Which ones have the most sort of input and involvement in the daily sort of runnings of the club there, from your perspective?
Well, I think it's hard for Giggsy to be involved on a day-to-day basis, of course, but he gets down when he can. Then you've got Nicky, but also plays a big role at Man United as well with the youth setup. So you're looking mainly to Paul Scholes, Phil Neville, Gary Neville, who they're constantly down there. To be honest, every game there's somebody, if not all three of them, there's a representative of the ownership, and even in training they come down to training, they play an active part, and it's it keeps standards high and keeps everybody on their toes, really.
And do they actually actively get involved then with the training sessions and stuff in terms of taking training sessions?
Earlier on in the season, more so. I think before Christmas there was a lot more interaction. Sort of, Scholes would come down and join in. Phil would normally take the session. But yeah, I think it's healthy. It was healthy for the lads because it gave the players who were at Salford an idea of what sort of the standards really. When they're seeing Paul Scholes, who in their eyes has been one of the best players over 20 years, and in most people's eyes, joining in a session and still, it's the hunger that you see within him. That's what sort of, when you come away from the session, a lot of the lads were like, Jesus, I can't believe he's still flying into tackles, or he wants it that much in a 1 hour training session on an AstroTurf. But that was highlighted a lot to me.
And obviously all players that are now sort of post-retirement, when you sort of play with someone like Scholesy, and I know he's played in a couple of charity matches recently as well, do you ever think maybe dust his boots off and come back and play for Salford City?
It's I mentioned it to him a while ago, and I think he's happy in the role that he's doing, but I think you'd love to see him play and pull on a Salford shirt, and any of them really. But I think Scholesy, he's blatantly still got the ability, and and still got it there if he wanted to play. So yeah, it'll be fantastic. It'll be romantic, if you like.
Is it something like, if you're a betting man, would you have a little cheeky punt on it, or would you outrule it?
I wouldn't have a punt on it. No, I think he's obviously, his career's lay at United, and I can't see any of them joining in. It would be a surprise, but again, you just wouldn't write it off completely. But if I was a betting man, I wouldn't put my money there.
Right. And one last question, obviously, regarding the sort of the class of '92 and the involvement as well with Salford City. There's a few players there, obviously, that they're yet to have their maiden managerial sort of role as such, and obviously with them owning Salford City, there is that potential that maybe one of them could test themselves out at that level, maybe for the first. Do you believe one of, I don't know, Gary, Phil, or Paul will maybe take a managerial role at Salford as a way maybe to catapult themselves later on in their career into a managerial role up the leagues?
Again, it's probably dependent on whereabouts the club is. I think not in the league it's currently in the Evo Stick Premier League. I think there's been no indication of it so far. They're very happy in the role that they take, and backing the Karen, the chairwoman, and the two managers, they've been very active in supporting them with all the knowledge and anything they need. So I think, of course, I think they've all got potential to be great managers. I think, Gary stands out and Scholes stands out as the sort of keys who I think would do really well as managers. Despite aside from Giggsy.
Yeah.
But I think they've all got the potential. Just whether it be at Salford or not, I don't think so.
Okay, lovely. And then obviously now to talk about yourself and your time at Manchester United as well.
Yeah.
I was going to say, obviously, you're a Manchester lad, born and bred.
Yeah.
Were you a Red then growing up?
Yeah, there's no choice really in my family. I think, my dad's a Red. He used to take us. I remember my first game was Sheffield Wednesday when I must have been about 5 or 6.
Yeah.
And you just get sucked in by Old Trafford. Really, I think the first time you go to Old Trafford, you've seen football on the highlights on the TV and everything, but to be live at Old Trafford and witness it is something that sticks in your mind forever, I think, and you never walk away from that.
And do you remember that game specifically? Obviously, you mentioned you were 5 or 6, obviously around the sort of heading towards the late 80s. So obviously before the kind of United resurgence under Fergie. So it would have been during the time when obviously United was still a bit of a sleeping giant. Mm-hmm. Is when you started becoming a fan then of United, presumably.
Yeah, I remember the likes of Neil Webb and people like that. I think that was... I remember it's silly little things you remember as a kid, but I remember thinking, "Oh, Webb, it's a bit like my name," So he stuck in my mind, and it's not so much for the football because you can't appreciate it as much at 5 or 6.
Yeah,
you only appreciate individual moments or people getting you off the edge of your seat and the energy in the stadium.
Yeah,
but yeah, there's players like that I remember, and Brian Robson was unreal, of course.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask, and obviously being a fan of the club. And playing football growing up, then presumably it was always your ambition then to represent United.
Yeah, it's. I think from being a kid, playing at 9 or 10, and I was playing for Manchester Boys at the time. We used to play over in at Merseybank, and I'd just gone to City. I was at City actually for a couple of months, and I don't know whether I'd kept losing the forms.
Right.
So by chance, I'd go down to Platt Lane and honestly didn't enjoy it. It was and I'm not just saying that because I was a United fan. They were doing things like press ups and that at 9 or 10 years old, and I just wanted to play football as most kids did.
Yeah.
So they kept trying to get me to sign the forms, and I'd come home, and the next week I'd go back, and they'd say, "Oh, have you signed the form?" I'd say, "Oh, no, I've lost it." I think I was probably getting home, and my dad was just hiding it or something. So he's probably got about 10 forms just piled up still at home. And then Nobby Styles came down to Merseybank and spoke to my dad.
Yeah.
I remember the City, and I said I'd come down to United. And the City scout at the time, one of the coaches at the time, came in the dressing room, Manchester Boys, and sort of said, "What are you doing? What do you mean you're going down to Man United?" I said, "Yeah, I'm going down to United, sort of going to speak to my dad." You know what I mean? Going to speak to my dad, and then that was it really. I walked in the first day, Nobby Stars, Brian Kidd, and you just sold with the it's where you want to be.
And was it your dad being sold on it just as much as yourself that ultimately decided that it would be United that you would go to?
I just think you know in yourself. I mean, even at that age, if something's good or it feels right, then you just do it and you just enjoy it. It doesn't matter whether it's difficult or you just get on with it and you enjoy it. And it was great for my dad because my dad could enthuse in the whole, in everything. Oh, I've just met Nobby and I've just, met Kiddo and all this. So my dad, it was great for my dad.
Yeah.
But I think from my perspective, I didn't need any persuading. I just knew Man United was where I wanted to be.
Yeah. And obviously I was going to ask, do you remember what you started playing for the youth team? I believe it was around 97 when you were the under-17s around 97.
Yeah, under-17s, yeah.
And then you signed your trainee contract in, was it 98?
So 98 I left school.
Yeah.
And I signed, I had a 3-month, until my 17th birthday, I had a 3-month YTS contract, and then I signed for first professional on my 17th birthday.
Yeah. And do you remember the emotions that you experienced when you realised actually that the dream was coming to fruition? Like obviously you play through the years as a youngster, but when you get to that age and you start signing contracts and things become real, don't they?
Yeah, they do. I think you realise, but I think you realise how far you've come, but you also look ahead of you and realise how far you've got to go.
Yeah.
Because I look at, I had so many strikers in the sort of under-19s, the reserves, and then obviously in the first team, and then doing so well, you think, where's my pathway? You know, where am I going to get through? But you constantly just work every day and believe.
Yeah.
And I think you always have in your head that, you know, if you don't make it at United, which is ultimately your dream,
yeah,
then you don't fall far. You don't fall far, and you can go and have a career elsewhere. I think David Johnson did it. He went to Bury, and then he went to Ipswich, and so on. So the footprint was there. But ultimately, when you're there, you're 17. You just think, right, I'm going to play. In your head, you think you're going to play for United. You're going to play for England. I'm going to do everything I can for that to be the case.
Yeah.
Obviously, it wasn't the case, but it's to a bigger, larger extent.
Yeah.
But you just work as hard as you can and try and grasp whatever opportunity you have in front of you.
And do you remember the hype that surrounded you? Obviously, you were banging in goals for fun for the under-17s, and then subsequently for the under-19s, you had a good record as well. Do you remember? Obviously, was it hard to not get carried away by that hype as a youngster, on the fringes of maybe breaking into the first team?
I think early 17s and 19s, no, I just got on with my football, and it wasn't. I just wanted to score goals. That was it.
Yeah.
And nothing sort of turned my head a little bit. I think the older, if you sit in blatant honesty, if I can sit in blatant honesty today, I think when I got to 19 and started to probably have a drink once, you know, go out, I'll have a little drink and do these other things of, you know, other sort of shopping and daft little things that just take your eye off football a little bit.
Yeah.
I think you start to really have to discipline yourself. But if you sort of indulge in those things a little bit too much, before you know it, you're not a United player anymore.
Yeah.
And I think there was a few phases where I had injuries. I had a lot of bad injuries. I think the boss always used to say to me, he said, "Son, you're so unlucky with your injuries," because it wasn't a little strain or something. I always had like major operations.
Yeah.
And he used to say, he used to say to me, "You've been unlucky," and that kind of thing. But if it wasn't for sort of having to fill time and things like that sometimes, which is key to a lot of the young lads now, you know, they're earning good money. They have time to fill once they finish training.
Yeah.
That's where your distractions come in. So I think it's you know, I'm sort of going off topic a little bit, but I think it's important that at that age, you keep your feet well grounded. That's what the boss did so well. Yeah. And I think if Giggsy was manager, he would emulate the same, or, you know, anybody of that troop, because, you know, they know what it's like to be a Man United player. When the famous story of obviously the boss going around to Lee Sharp and Giggsy's house, you know, it's that kind of thing. Whilst that's not what you want as a 17, 18, 19-year-old, it's what you need to be a Man United player. And I think, you know, it's vital.
Yeah. And obviously during the period that you were at the club, you alluded to it before, you had some really world-class, top-notch strikers ahead of you in the pecking order, obviously, when you were coming through. Yeah. Was that an early example of, like, nowadays the pundits talk about how it's very difficult for young English talent to break into top teams because there's been this influx of European talent that kind of consumes the top sides. Were you an early example of that when you look at the players that you had ahead of you and sort of the almost unenviable task of trying to usurp them and get into the team?
I think so, but I think at United it's different, because if you are good enough, you know, you get your opportunity. And unfortunately, I can sit here and sort of be honest and say that I wasn't that extra bit that you need, if you see, to come in and dislodge Ruud van Nistelrooy, or to come, you know, to come out and say sort of it was Forlan at the time, and people, you know, York and Cole and Sheringham and Solskjaer, you know, you have to be something extra special to come and dislodge those people who they've paid a lot of money for. Yeah. So I think it's you know, it's important that you can see that, because, you know, a lot of people have a hard fall if they don't see that kind of thing. Yeah. But the foreign players come in. There is an influx of a lot of foreign players, but you see if somebody is that good at the moment and they're at the right club, they'll get the opportunity. You look at Liverpool, Raheem Sterling and people like that. Yeah. He came in when Suarez was there and so on. You know, you do get your opportunity. Yeah. But I think what's changed now more than anything is that lower league players like Lee Sharp and people like that, you know, nobody goes to Torquay to buy a player into the Premier League anymore. The gap's got a lot bigger. But if you're at the club, you do get an opportunity, and then it's up to you to take it. Yeah. And when I interviewed Daniel Nardiello, we were talking a little bit off camera, someone you know well from your time at United as well. You mentioned he was the year below you, I think, when you were coming up through the ranks. But when I interviewed Dan, he mentioned that
out of all the strikers there, or in fact all the players there, the senior player who he found most, shall we say, forthright in offering advice was Teddy Sheringham. He said he would always stay behind after training and watch games and point out things that he could do from a striker's perspective.
Yeah.
Who was the striker at the time at the club? Was it also Teddy, who you found was imparting kind of wisdom to you?
Well, I cleaned Andy Cole's boots. So Andy Cole, I used to meticulously watch. I watched them all, to be honest. There was no one that was more sort of impressionable than the other. I think Andy Cole was one I'd talk to sometimes, and he'd just give me little pointers.
Yeah.
But I'd sit and watch training and just watch. If I couldn't join in, I'd sit and watch sort of the finishing, and I used to watch Ollie finishing. And certain people who try and chip the keeper and bend it round, Ollie would just be so clinical with everything that he did. It was like a religion to him to score a goal.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to make it fancy, just bottom corner every time, bottom corner.
Yeah.
And then they all trained very differently. Yorkie always had a smile on his face and did things that would get you on the edge of your seat. Coley was just clinical, worked hard. His movement was unbelievable. And Teddy just did everything with class. He did some of his finishing is sublime, but he could score a tap in, and his hold-up play and everything was brilliant. And again, you can go through them all. There was no one in particular, but I just look at them all and they're all amazing.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask as well, when I interviewed Dan, he mentioned there was some sort of initiation process at the club.
Yeah.
Some amusing story he was recounting about a time when they were whacking each other on the head or something with some spoons. I can't remember, some daft story, but do you remember your initiation right at the club?
Not to be too detailed, but it's sort of like an icebreaker, because when you're walking out, you're 16, you're coming out of school, and you're going to be full-time. It's your first job, in effect. Yeah. And you're going in, but the building you're walking into is full of everybody you've seen. Lads have had posters on the walls and so on, household names.
Yeah.
So to break the ice so it's not so frosty,
yeah.
So the first team would just sort of just play a few games, if you like, with the younger lads, and the reserves would obviously, having been through it before, they would have sit and have a laugh, basically a laugh at your expense.
Yes.
But it just breaks the ice. So I remember mine. It wasn't one of the worst, but I just had to get up and sing a little bit, I think, and then I had to do a bit of beatboxing for somebody else to sing. It was something quite breezy, but it was all right.
Okay. Do you remember the song?
No, I don't remember it. I don't remember. I was probably that nervous at the time. I just was just singing anything.
Yeah. No, fair enough. And I was going to say as well, you were kind of at the club during quite a curious phase, because obviously it was a time when the club moved from being this kind of sleeping giant in many ways through the early 90s and a bit beyond to becoming what it is now, which is this kind of global juggernaut. Yeah. And obviously that was evidenced by something as small as, for example, transitioning from the Cliff to Carrington, which obviously was during your period as well.
Totally.
Was it kind of strange to be at the club during that period when it was sort of evolving so quickly?
I think you look at it at the time and you just get on with your football. It's a football pitch. You go in, you train, but you do realise you're getting there's a lot more on offer, whether it be sort of the science side of things and the fitness side, and then obviously your facilities, as you're saying. So you see the growth, but you're part of the growth. Yeah. So you don't notice it as much until I left, really, and I went to Watford. And firstly, I went on loan to Port Vale, and that was a shock for me,
right?
Because I'd always had the facilities, always had everything I needed to be as good as I could be at the time. I went to Port Vale, and the first day, I remember we went in, and Brian Horton said, "Right, lad, you're doing the stands today." I thought, "What do you mean you're doing the stands?" He says, "Yeah, you're running the stands." So I thought, "Oh, it must be sort of just up and down." But what he had to do is run the whole stadium.
Yeah.
So he'd go up the stand, across where they sell the hot dogs, down the next gantry sort of, and then all the way up, like all the way around. And I'm thinking, where's the football? I was thinking, where's the football? Because everything we did at United was with the football.
Yeah.
So and then we played a five-a-side with the little orange furry ball, and I was thinking, where's the real football? But it was good. It was an eye-opener. And then I had a month loan spell where I got kicked every 2 seconds because I'd obviously come from United. Yeah. And you realise that, okay, it's not reserve team football. You know, people want to hurt you in effect. So you've got to go out there and stick up for yourself and make sure that you're at it. So you do realise I think, and that's why Sir Alex would send you out on loan and things like that. You realise that where you are and be grateful for what you've got and maximise it if you can.
Yeah, and obviously you mentioned Sir Alex there, sort of widely regarded as one of the greatest football managers ever. What are your abiding memories of Sir Alex? Obviously he was there when you signed your trainee contract and everything like that. And I know you actually also left the club having been offered a 3-year contract, I believe, which is quite a rare position to be in. A lot of people leave the club kind of not voluntarily in that regard.
Yeah.
What are your memories of Sir Alex, just dealing with him?
You know, from being 10 years old to sort of seeing him actually clearing out his office at Carrington,
right,
and everything in between it, I've got nothing but respect and admiration for the man.
Yeah.
I think as a 16-year-old, 17-year-old and growing up, you need like a father figure in effect. And obviously we've got our own fathers, a lot of the lads, and that's not what I'm trying to say. But once you're in the building and for somebody to set standards and to guide you through what it's like to, to be a Man United player for starters. And secondly, if you're not a Man United, to be a well-rounded, sort of well-educated young person. I think so. Always giving you something to fall back on. So when, he was the first to sort of pull you up if your standards were low and make sure you were hitting high standards, because he expected high standards higher than you actually thought you could hit yourself.
Yeah.
And I think you can look in the first team, and not many players leave United and do better than did at United.
Yeah.
Because the standards that are sort of demanded from you. But again, I look back to being 10. He knew my dad's name and he knew all my family's name. A rare quality which is not many people possess.
Yeah.
And I think 14, I remember I signed my schoolboy forms, and he was just very personable. But I remember the word that sticks when it comes into my mind, the word that sticks out that he used to say to me at 14, 15 was sacrifice. And it sticks in my head to this day that you don't get anything without sacrifice. If you want to be a Man United player, when your friends are going out doing whatever they're doing, you're not a part of that, and you have to kind of accept it and be okay with it.
Yeah.
And it runs through the years where in society you're meant to be partying and you're meant to be doing all that kind of thing. So it's you always used to say the rewards are there, but you have to be disciplined enough. So things like discipline and the sacrifice you have to make and the standards you set, the things that I carry through my life now that he taught me, really. And then there's been twice in my adult career where I knocked on his door, having been at other clubs and not spoken to him for a few years and played against him and so on.
Yeah.
And knocked on his door and he just said, "How can I help you, son?" He's so personable and what a great man, to be honest.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask as well about, obviously, that you played with a plethora of world-class players as well during your time at United, whether it be on the pitch but also in training, behind the scenes, etc.
Yeah.
The players that most people pinpoint, or the player, should I say, most people pinpoint, is Paul Scholes, in terms of like just world-class. Who's the players that stand out for you from when you train with them?
Scholes, he's again, it sounds like you're going over sort of old, going over old ground, but the way he plays football, his awareness, none of it was down to physique, or it was down to pure technical ability, his desire to want to win games, to want to win a training match, his desire to keep his own standards, and the way he kept them the way through and to be as good as he was. I mean, I don't sit and remember in his old career that I watched him ever being flattened on the floor, in a tackle. I can remember him flying into tackles. But I don't remember anybody, and that says a lot for somebody's awareness and the way they play football, and considering he had the ball so much, and he wasn't the quickest player on the pitch, he's unbelievable to play with. You'd get a tackle if you were in training, as is still evident if he trains at Saltford. But Scholes, he just stood out a million miles. Giggsy as well. I think Beckham, his work rate was unbelievable. When everybody was questioning, his off the field, lifestyle, if you like, when it was, because he was obviously at a time where the media started to take more of an interest. But never one day did I ever see his work rate or his effort drop in training or his quality. They'd be out there every day practicing, and when you're watching people like that, it makes you think, well, if they're doing it, we need to be doing it, you know, as younger players.
Yeah.
Again, you know, you look at, and Dwight York, I used to love how he played football, just with a smile on his face.
Yeah.
You know, he used to make me smile watching him play.
Yeah.
Roy Keane, when his standards were unbelievable. If you lost the ball in training, even once, you'd get the glare. The second time, you wouldn't get the glare, you'd get told about it. But when you look at it, it demands standards from you.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what he demanded from everybody. If you didn't, the dressing room ran itself in effect. You know, Gary Neville, like I say, Roy Keane and people like that, they demanded standards from everybody, and that's why they were so good. And Sir Alex Ferguson put that together, you know, knowing what he was doing.
Yeah, and obviously, you know, the players that you're still in contact with now, the class of '92 kind of players as well. Who are the other players at United are you still in contact with, or you know, you still regularly chat to?
There's odd players at different times. So, you know, there's people you see along the way. I still speak to John O'Shea once in a while, Wes Brown, Rio, quite a few along the way. Really, there's a few other players as well. But I think once you've been at United, I speak to Ashley Young, you know, often as well.
Yeah,
he's had a great season this year, to be fair.
Yeah.
And what's good about that is that he was, you know, everybody had written him off really as fans. A lot of people had said, but he's come back and he's you know, he's had a phenomenal season.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot that I know, and you just sort of chat to along the way, but some more regular than others, really.
And is there any? I remember Nards was telling a few little stories, but is there any kind of amusing anecdotes that you're at liberty to disclose from your time at United? I don't know, anything funny from behind the scenes, anything random that anyone did there? You know, nothing too controversial, of course, but just funny little things that the everyday United fan might not be aware of.
See, that immediately, I've got the boss in my head saying what goes on behind closed doors stays behind closed doors. Immediately, I've got that, you know. So I've got to tread carefully even now. But, no, I think
was there any hobbies that any of them had? I don't know, like one of them played a particular instrument or something random that maybe not everyone's aware of.
No, I think it's like a story. I remember when I talk about standards at United, Sir Alex was. I remember we just moved to Carrington.
Yeah.
And we were in the dressing room. There's a sign, so where you take your boots off to go in through to the dressing room. There's a sign saying "No boots beyond here."
Right.
Okay. So, because there was a boot room where you hang your boots, etc. So no boots beyond here. And then, so I'd cleaned my boots coming from training, gone in, taken my boots in the dressing room. I'd cleaned them; they were gleaming. Put them in my place. Same. David Healy had done the same, and one or two other boys. We go home that day.
Yeah.
And then come back in next morning, and Al Wiley's kit man, he says, "Oh, Webbs, the boss wants to see you upstairs." I'm thinking first it gives you a bit of, you know, what does he want to see me for? And then I thought, well, I've not done anything wrong. So I'm thinking maybe new contract, you know. So I go up and knock on his door, and I opened the door and looked in his face, thought, "There's no new contract. No, I've done something here." So he just said. He said, "Were they your boots, son?" I said, "Yeah, Gaffer, they were my boots." He says, "That's a week's wages." I said, What do you mean a week's wages for what? He said, "Did you not read the sign?" He said, "No boots beyond that sign." And I just walked out. I thought he's going to retract it, or but no, he did me for a week's wages. David Healy the same. He did the both of us a week's wages for not upholding standards. So
right,
yeah. So that's probably a familiar story.
Yeah. Well, obviously, there's so much I could talk to you about anyway, but obviously appreciate the time today.
No problem.
Absolute pleasure chatting with you.
No, it's been great. Thank you.
Thanks, Danny.
Cheers.
And if you could subscribe to Straight News TV, comment on the video below, and give it a like as well, that'd be quality.
My name's Danny Webber. You're watching Straight News TV.